The Quill with Professor Edwin L. Peterson from the University of Pittsburgh, produced by W.T.
Hello. It's good to be with you again. This is our 6th television class. You know, there's one thing about a television class that I don't like so much, and that is that I'm never able to tell for sure whether I've been of any help to or not. That's one reason I want to thank you for the letters and the postal cards that you have sent in from time to time. It does make a difference to me in knowing whether I am able to, whether I'm really helping you or not. I'm not able to answer the letters, but I do appreciate them, and I just wanted you to know that. Well, how have you been getting along with those sentences we were working with last time? Have you been reforming them? You know, there's a big difference between sentences and people in that respect. If you try to reform people, you get cross with them, and they get cross with you, and nobody at all gets better. Everybody gets worse. But when you try to reform sentences, it's a different matter. You love them, and they love you. Maybe by now all your sentences love you, and all of them are going to behave, and they're going to go straight and do just the right things. Just the same, you watch them. It's possible that one of them will try to double time you. It's possible that you'll have to straighten him out. Him, I mean her. In this, our 6th meeting, we're not going to leave sentences exactly, but we are going to take them with us on a little trip. So you'll be sure that they behave, and be sure that they're faithful to you. With this meeting, we are going to start something that I hope will eventually be a lot of fun. We're going to start building these sentences into paragraphs. And a paragraph, if it is built right, is no minor achievement. It's something that any writer can be proud of. We began 6 weeks ago with the little unit of writing called the word. And then we moved ahead to the larger unit called the sentence. Now we come to a unit called the paragraph, a unit that is large enough to give us leg room, large enough to let us spread our wings a little, too. If we're ever to amount to much as writers, we must remember that man has not only legs, but also wings. Trouble is that most of us walk all the time. There are a good many different kinds of paragraphs. Oh, there's a newspaper paragraph, a narrative paragraph, a descriptive paragraph, a dialogue paragraph, a lot of them. But the one that we're going to examine is the explaining paragraph, the explanation paragraph. This explaining paragraph has a definite structure. The structure is almost as old, I suppose, as thinking itself, or as explaining itself. It's a pattern that you and I use every day of our lives, and yet somehow when we start to write, we often forget what life has taught us. The structure of an explaining paragraph is a good bit like the structure of an old-fashioned fan. I brought one along with me to class. Remember when your grandmother used to carry one of these along with that little gold box that had little peppermint pills in it? Now the fan the fan is pivoted at this end, and the pivot corresponds to what we shall later call a generalization of the paragraph. It holds these spokes together. But of course the fan is utterly useless until it is unfolded and expanded. Now it's a useful instrument. Now it's not much of anything. This fanning out we shall later call the development or the evidence of the paragraph. But let's notice something else about the structure of this fan. I don't know whether you can see it or not, but there's a little ribbon running through the spokes near the tip. And this ribbon helps the pivot to hold the spokes together, keep them from falling apart. Later on, we're going to think of this span again. We're going to call this the summary of the paragraph. Now let's see how in our everyday talking we use this span pattern. Not our writing this time, no, but just our talking. Let's see briefly how it works in real life. We come home from shopping or from the office or from school, and someone asks, well, how was your day today? This question is always asked brightly and hopefully. But our day was not, let us say, a very good one. For the last hour, we've been trying to forget about it. Today, everything went wrong. And so we fix our questioner with an indignant stare, and we say very simply and with an utter disregard for the formal English that Miss Murphy used to teach us, we say, my day, terrible, lousy. That, you see, is the pivot of the fan. That's the general comment on the day. Now, if the conversation ended there, we'd be very unhappy. We'd spend the rest of the evening biting our fingernails or biting somebody else's. We want the privilege of expanding our dissatisfaction with the day. And the wise listener will not deny us that privilege. He listens while we talk. These details that we talk about are the expanding of the fan, and talk we do. We wring the day dry of every unpleasant detail. The pleasant ones we either forget or we ignore. And at last we can't think of any more unpleasant details to recount. And so with a great flourish we say, what kind of a day did I have? Oh, it was perfectly terrible. I haven't had such a bad day since I fell down the cellar steps and broke both my legs. Now, that final remark, of course, is the ribbon, the summary that runs through all the spokes and holds them together. And after that, after we're done with all that, can't tell, we might be fit to live with again. And in a sense, we should be fit to live with, for we've done something very well. We have, in our anger, we have talked an explaining paragraph that has excellent structure. First, we expressed an opinion about the day, a judgment upon it, an attitude towards it. And then we went ahead and gave the actual details on which we based our attitude. And finally, for fear anyone should misunderstand, we repeated our opinion of the day in a final sentence. Now let's think for a minute about this powerful relation between an opinion or an attitude or generalization and the exact evidence on which the generalization was made. In writing and in ordinary thinking, a generalization can be useful and good, or it can be destructive and evil. That depends partly on whether the opinion was justified by the evidence that was presented. Careless, prejudiced thinking often takes the form of tossing out broad generalities and opinions that are not supported by evidence. Gossips use this method. Some politicians use this method. But careful and honest thinking also makes use of generalities. It makes use of them by looking very carefully at the evidence and then extracting from the evidence the meaning. A good generalization extracts the essence, the essential quality. It's a distillation of the whole experience. It's like a label that we put on a box before we store it away in the attic. It may say canceled checks, or a big bundle that might say fishing equipment, or a label that says winter blankets. Suppose you have up in the attic, for instance, a box, a shoe box usually, that's labeled high school mementos. Now there are many things in the box. There are dance programs and pennants, all kinds kinds of things. Here's an old dance program, a book that has photographs in it, all kinds of different things. Here's a little fan. You know, that fan would make a pretty good illustration of our generalization, too. But these have one thing, at least, in common. They have one quality in common, and that is that they all refer to high school material. The label was important there. High school mementos was important. It tells us in a general way what's in the box, and that, of course, is a great help to us when we're looking for the material we want. Negatively, it's a help to us, too, in that we know that we shouldn't look there for a pair of pliers or for our old tennis shoes. And that label warns us not to put into that box anything that does not have the common quality of the label. But labels of themselves, you see, are not very important. They're not very interesting. If we want to get any pleasure out of that box, we'll have to open it and spread the contents out on the desk or down on the floor and look at them. And then the memories come back, and the thing takes on meaning and significance. Those details and their associations make the label come alive. They are also proof that the label was right. They are the evidence to support the generalization of the label, and without them, the generalization would have very little conviction, little life. Both the generalization, then, and the evidence and the details are needed for the complete and unified experience. And so it is with the explaining paragraph. It's part general, and it's part specific. The general will have little meaning until it is fanned out, expanded into the specific. It's held together by the generalization. But there is always that dual relation between the general and the specific in the explaining paragraph. And that's why, unconsciously, we used that double arrangement when we came home from dinner and were in a bad humor and first used the slang generalization, lousy or terrible, and then the detailed explanation, and finally the summary that amounted to a restatement of the original generalization. Well, maybe I've been maligning this explaining paragraph. We don't always have to come home for dinner in a bad humor, thank goodness. With this type of paragraph, we can explain almost everything. You can explain how an atom does the split. You can explain how to get power into the end of a sentence with the explaining paragraph. You can explain why the sky is blue. You can explain why you still feel a twinge of pain after all these years when you think of what you did do or didn't do back in Miss Murphy's class in the 6th grade. That'd make a good explaining paragraph. Miss Murphy herself, the tired, strict, pencil-tapping, underpaid, dedicated Miss Murphy herself, isn't she worth an explaining paragraph? I should like very much sometime to tell how much I owe to Miss Murphy. She meant a great deal to me, and I should like to say something about it in the explaining paragraph. This explaining paragraph can do many, many things. Let's see, for example, how an amateur writer uses the explaining pattern to tell how much she enjoys getting home from dinner after a discouraging day. I say amateur because some of you have been, in letters, have suggested that you'd like to hear some amateur writing, as well as the writing of the really great ones. So let's hear the work, then, of one who is not a professional, but who is on the way, it seems to me, to clear, honest, convincing writing. This is a paragraph by a young freshman girl, college, paragraph that tells a great deal about the girl, about her home, about her attitude towards her home. It begins, coming home from dinner at dusk in winter, is a comforting experience. Now, already we say she has made a good start. She has said in general what she wants to say. She has put a label on the experience. She has pivoted the details that we expect to come. But we know that a label all by itself is not convincing. We have to see the evidence. We have to spill out these details on the desk. We must see the specific evidence that justifies that generalization comforting. And we're not going to have very long to wait. The paragraph goes on. I hurry up the walk, cold, hungry, a little depressed by the day's mistakes. But here at home, I am sure of warmth and food and friendliness. Now we know, even better than before, what to expect. 3 sub-labels have been pasted under the main label, comforting. They are warmth, food, and friendliness. But it's time for the writer to leave generalities and to become specific. She had better do so at once, and she does. I balance in my arms my paper and purse with maybe a pound of butter from the A&P or a pair of shoes with the heels straightened, and my fingers mechanically grope for the right key in the dark. She's off to a good start, we say. The interest in the paragraph, you'll notice, picks up as soon as we come to that highly specific and homey detail, a pound of butter from the A&P. Goes on from there with that pair of shoes with the heels straightened. How much better that is than if they'd been new shoes. Well, she's doing well. Can she keep it up? Let's see. I like the warm, moist air which meets me in the hall, steaming my glasses and smelling of roast pork, a savory dish for a frosty night. See how accurately she's following the labels? Already we feel with her the warmth, and we smell the roasting pork. Mother hears me, she says, close the door, which shuts out for a while the day and its mistakes, and she calls to me from the living room as I run up the stairs. The shaded light over the davenport catches the glints of white in her hair as I stoop to kiss her, and the bright green tips of the fern fronds tremble in the current of air. And now friendliness has settled gently over the household and also over the paragraph itself. The paragraph has become very specific, too, and as a result, we see with her eyes the glints of white in her mother's hair, and we see the green tips of the fern fronds trembling, and then comes the homiest detail of all. The draft, she says, stirs the flames in the grate, and they sputter over the broken radiant and turn from blue to orange. What an honest, sincere detail that broken radiant is. Most young writers would have changed the brilliant detail to, say, sparks from an open fireplace. They would have altered the whole picture of mood for the sake of a conventional falsehood. But not this author. It's a gas fire. A radiant is broken. Wonderful. And then she goes on. I chuckle because Mother fears I will spoil my appetite when I nibble at my salad on my way through the dining room. And I coax Margaret to tell me in the kitchen what's for dessert. And with that sentence, we come to an end of the evidence. Now the amateur author wisely adds a summarizing sentence that suggests the generalization that she started with. She says, the bubbling percolator, the hissing fat in the oven, the dripping faucet in the sink, each familiar detail has a message of welcome. Simple, commonplace, familiar, if you will, but coming home for dinner is an important part of my life. And we who have read have shared the experience of this part of another person's life. We know that person. We know her almost as a friend. And with her, we have heard the dripping faucet. We've watched those blue and orange flames. We've seen the white in her mother's hair. We've shared the experience of steamed glasses and roast pork. We know that for her, she was right when she said that coming home for dinner at dusk in winter is a comforting experience. She has explained it by giving us first a generalization, and then by combing out that generalization into specific strands of evidence. Now, that was written by a college freshman. Let's look next at a bit of amateur writing done by an older woman who, by virtue of being older, may have a richer store of experience from which to draw. The pattern of this paragraph differs a little from the pattern of the other paragraph. In this one, the generalization comes near the close, comes in the interior. Let me read it now so that you'll be sure to recognize it, the generalization, when we come to it. Upstairs, I began all at once to cry, and I was not ashamed. Now, let's remember that when we get to it. Why, we ask. We're begging for an explanation. We want the little supporting details that will explain this generalization. Because this paragraph is, to me at least, a moving little piece of writing, I'm going to read it straight without any interruption at all. We had waited until Bert came home from college. Reddy, our old dog, belonged to Bert. Reddy was always careful to give that old paw of his, first to one and then to another of us, but still we knew that he loved Bert best. They had had their puppy days together, had romped and tussled, had hunted bear with Bert's first gun, and a summer 7 or 8 years ago, when Bert had such a bad case of the measles, I always believed Reddy had them too. Now, Bert knelt on the rug by the fire with Red's fine old head nuzzled against his knee while Dr. Barrett made the examination. It would be the kindest thing to do, the doctor said, and I nodded. I could not speak. I could not see. And then Bert, suddenly quite grown, said, "Please don't stay, Mother. I'll stay with Red." I left obediently. Upstairs, I began all at once to cry, and I was not ashamed. I wept for Reddy, as loyal a friend as I shall ever have. I wept for little boys. I wept for years now gone. I wept because I had so obediently left and come upstairs. And as I wept, Bert came. He stood there in the doorway, a useless dog collar hanging from his hand. This, it seems to me, is amateur writing worthy of a professional, very deep and honest and good professional. It's the explanation of an emotion, and we're grateful to the writer for being kind enough to let us share her grief. And how did she do it? In the same old way. First, of course, by being the honest and sincere and good woman that she is. Second, by using words that are so simple that they don't come between us and her theme. Third, by using the pattern of the general and the specific. Now, in our first paragraph, generalization came at the beginning, and this one, it came in the interior. Let's look at a paragraph now in which the generalization comes at the end. And this time, let's go back to, 500 or 600 years before the birth of Christ, to Aesop's fable about the astronomer, and see how old and sound this pattern is. Here is the fable with the topic sentence, the generalization at the end. An astronomer used to walk out every night to gaze upon the stars. It happened one night that as he was wandering in the outskirts of the city, with his whole thoughts wrapped up in the skies, he fell into a well. On his calling out, one who had heard his cries ran up to him, and when he had listened to the story said, "My good man, while you are trying to pry into the mysteries of heaven, you overlook the common objects that are under your feet." I wonder if there could be a moral for writers there. It may seem strange at first, but actually this pattern of the general and the specific is not so much a matter of thinking, of writing, as it is of thinking. It's the pattern that the mathematician uses in a geometry book. It's the pattern of the parables of Jesus. It's the pattern of a chemist's report. It's the pattern of Beethoven when he writes in the sonata form. It's a general pattern. It's the pattern the doctor uses when he looks at all the evidence and makes a diagnosis. It's a good pattern for all of us to know. It's an important pattern. Well, in this meeting of our television classroom, I've been so eager to make clear the basic structure of this explaining paragraph that I've oversimplified it consciously and purposely. In the meetings that follow, though, I'll try to give you some methods that will make your evidence, help you to make your evidence exciting. Only our time for this meeting's almost over. Let's look at a closing paragraph. Let's look at one of David's Psalms, the 23rd, let us say, because it is so well known and so great. This is a very good explaining paragraph. The generalization comes in the first sentence. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It means that David's life will be so full that he will neither need nor desire anything else. That's the generalization with the pleasant overtone of the Lord is my shepherd. That's the pivot of our fan, let's say. The next sentences are the development or the expansion into specific details. Let's make one little expansion here. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. And the next sentence is the ribbon that runs through the tips and brings us back to the generalization with which David started. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Yes, the explaining paragraph is a universal form. It's used by the mathematician in proving a proposition. It's used by the musician who talks with notes instead of words. It's used by the irate husband coming home after a bad day. It's used by the mother who tells her child in general of the danger of fire. It's used by the scientist who is writing the results of his experiment. And it's used by the poet David who is singing out the glory of God, and by the amateur writer who also has things to sing of, doesn't he? Goodbye then, and I hope that we also will be able to say in paragraph form some of the good things that we want to say.
You have just seen The Quill with Professor Edwin L. Peterson from the University of Pittsburgh, directed by Carl Freeborn, technical supervision Larry Flavin, from WQED First in Community Television.